Welcome to ChannelX TV. Delighted to be joined today by James Hirst, who was one of the MCs at the ChannelX Conference a couple of weeks ago. So, James, welcome. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, no, I can't believe it's been a couple of weeks since the conference already, really. So it's how time's flown. But yeah, it was great to be part of it.
So, for those that weren't there, just tell us what are your impressions of the conference? Both the venue, the expo, the speakers.
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic. Yeah, it's it's a nice venue. I think being around Liverpool Street from a kind of getting there and commuting, someone who lives out of London personally, it's a really good venue, especially with the Elizabeth line. So that kind of area is fantastic, buzzing area and stuff. But I think it's great. And I think the conference this year, I think the level of speakers, the quality of the people, the kind of, I guess, the suppliers that you had, everything about it felt really, really good, and it was really buzzy, which is good. I think it's again, you'll know better than me, having been in events, but I think the lag from coronavirus for events has been hit you guys quite hard. But I think it's it definitely feels like it's back to how it should be. So and in terms of the sessions, I think if people found my track, which was the Brands D2C and Social Commerce.
I wanted to ask about that.
That was the best place. They found the right place.
I wanted to ask about that because you had some interesting speakers, and the first was Claudine from Snapchat. Yeah. How did that go?
Oh, she was great. Yeah, fantastic. Really interesting presentation. Really full room. I have to admit, I'm not a Snap user. I hadn't been a Snap user, but after watching that, I was like, right, I'm downloading Snapchat, not just to see what my son's doing on it, but actually to do it. Some of the stuff they would talk about and how you could, the activations and how you can use Snap was fantastic, and I think it really set the scene, set the agenda for the rest of the day, for the what followed. It was a really, really good kickoff session. Snap are they're doing some great things, and it was good to hear. I think a lot of the audience seemed to be really interested about Claudine shared stuff from the what to do at Christmas, how to kind of leverage Snap from a sort of a sporting event, and so really real actionable insights from it. And I think as I say, it kind of from the rest of the day, it kind of continued really from there. Launching straight into, obviously I ran a couple of three panel sessions, I think, and moderated some of those as well. And we had some great kind of conversations, and B&Q were there talking about how they're leading the way in the kind of marketplace they've been developing and stuff like that. So some really interesting ones.
And I think your second session was interesting because we've got Georgie, who I've got to give a shout out to, the only speaker that's been to all three ChannelX conferences. I've spoken at them all. Georgie from Novello, Glenn from Plain and Simple, Marnie from Bionic, and Alistair from Map Digital. So what were you talking about on that? I know it was Omnichannel integration and seamless customer journeys, but what came out interesting from that panel?
You're gonna put me on the spot now, aren't you? See if I can remember it. It was 2 weeks ago. No, it was really interesting. And again, it was we had Georgie and Marnie who were coming at it from a sort of a D2C brand space. You had Glenn, who was a marketplace, and then you had Alistair, who was sort of covered that all based on the agency landscape, or the kind of the tech landscape, supplier landscape. And so it's a really interesting session, loads covered. We could have pretty much talked all day, but a lot of it was I think one of the interesting things where it was a customer service, about customer journey, and tech wasn't really talked about. It was about kind of really we talked about how consistency was really important across marketplaces, across platform, but just generally we talked about how customer journey, it's all Marnie very much sort of led with the kind of audience. It starts from the audience, it starts from the consumer, and really that kind of sort of set the scene really. And so it was a really kind of interesting conversation, and hopefully the audience left with some sort of things that they could take away about it's not just about using ChatGPT. It's actually it's about understanding what what your audiences are, how to be consistent across marketplaces. And then also Glenn was really interesting, obviously, talking about the kind of the wider kind of more kind of generic, use the wrong word, but I'll use generic marketplaces versus sort of more niche marketplaces, and how the pros and the cons. So wide ranging topics, but hopefully it left the audience with a lot to sort of mull over, let's say.
And then from wide ranging, your next session was really specific because you had Stephen from Stephen from Socksnob.
Easy for you to say.
And George from ILFD, along with Georgia from Limworks. Because as far as I'm aware, these are the first 2 UK retailers to start selling on Shien.
Yeah, no, that was interesting. And again, I don't know much about Shien, so it was really interesting to kind of really dig in about that as a platform and how that can be used, or utilized, not just instead of, but in, across the board with, everything like, obviously Snap and, and then, we had TikTok coming after it. So, all of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, no, really interesting, sort of a new marketplace in sort of how, these, well, the 3 of them were, kind of very progressive with how they, with use of the of what is a largely kind of relatively new platform and stuff as well. So I think some really interesting stuff there, learnings, I think, from what to do, what not to do, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think it's especially interesting to have had Shien talked about at the conference because not only is it a new marketplace, but it's got let's say, an interesting reputation. And I think one of the things that they definitely want to do is get more and more local retailers on board, supplying local product brands that people in Britain already know about. So I think that's definitely one to watch for the future.
Oh, yeah,
and they're the three people to speak to if you want to find out more about it.
Yeah, very knowledgeable. Yeah, like say, I think it's always nice to have the kind of the mavens of the world talking about their experience, isn't it? To kind of people that are maybe less familiar with or thinking, I would like to do that. I know I've seen a bit about it, but actually, how do I do it? It's, and you're hearing from people who have actually been there, done that, experienced it, and have the, and have the learnings to share. So, and that's the great thing about, I think, a lot of these topics where it was, the people that were talking and the panelists were, super smart and actually they were talking from considerable experience.
And then after lunch, we were back to some more marketplaces with B&Q, and you had Holly and Reese from B&Q presenting.
Yes.
And B&Q we know has grown phenomenally, but what did they have to share? What was interesting there for you?
Again, I think with B&Q talking about the moving away from our stage, the closing keynote from with the Debenhams, and that stuff. What I think is really interesting is you think of B&Q as being, well, I think of B&Q as being this one, a store you go to when you need this Y and Z, and this. But actually, what was really interesting there is how they're really embracing the kind of marketplace landscape and how they're leveraging the sort of technology, they're leveraging their kind of the name, the industry name, and everything they're doing to really help. I think the kind of key learning was I think we talked about it previously, is seamless customer journeys, but I think they really pushed on how actually seamless it is, and actually again everything is designed, what they're trying to do is designed for the their audience, for their their marketplace, and for the brands that they want to kind of come on. And I think with these sort of things, isn't it, you always think of tech platforms, and if it's tech involved in doing the X, Y and Z, there's going to be barriers in play and they're going to want to charge lots of money. But I think it was really kind of refreshing to see someone like B&Q leading the way in developing their marketplace, and doing it in the right way, I guess, and not taking advantage of their their big name, so to speak. But they're great. There are a few tech issues, but they and I have to say, Holly and Reese presented amazingly, in light of that. Their presentation kept bouncing to and from. They handled it really well, it was it was really interesting, actually.
So then you had another really interesting session based around TikTok. You had Nora from TikTok Shop, who's massively knowledgeable, George from So Sweet, who sells millions of sweets on TikTok, and also Chloe and Tabby, who together form the Sugar Coated Sisters, who are musical comedians and work with brands to promote brands on TikTok. So that must have been a fun session. Tell us about that one.
Yeah, no, it was. They're all fun, but this was great. And I think the interesting piece with this session was how you guys curated it, really, which was you had a brand, you had some creators, and then you had TikTok in the middle. So it was really interesting, and just hearing the sort of different perspectives. Obviously, Nora talked a lot about how TikTok are trying to help you know, the both ends, both brand and, you know, and business owner and creators. You had a great perspective from George, who has been, you know, I mean, he's ultimately grown their business, and I think he's a brand, but he's also a creator, which is really interesting as well. I think they're
so he does in-house creation a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly. So I think having his perspective, you know, again, and they've just grown massively, I think, since they, and so it's a real success story on how to use TikTok. And then the Sugar Coated Sisters, like, I hadn't heard of them before I got introduced and we met before the show. But I mean, they were lovely, they were great, and they're uber funny. And since then, I've just been engrossed in their videos as well. But you know, they could talk about, and actually all the three guys could talk about, you know, what it is to be a creator, but actually the kind of you know, what is it that makes successful TikTok campaigns, really, and coming at it from 3 different angles, and you know, but then the learnings as well. You know, what is it that on the flip side, what is it that can, you know, make a campaign go, you know, wrong, you know, so, you know, those sort of learnings as well was really interesting. And again, I think where, you know, often you would expect sort of the TikTok, the platform to be a bit protective over stuff, but again, Nora was free flowing and, you know, very kind of like open to kind of talking, and it was just like I say, a really open, interesting panel about, you know, how to be successful on a platform like TikTok, which is huge. And again, you know, I've left it. I'm trying to work out how to get on TikTok myself now, and maybe even work with the Sugar Coated Sisters. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's worth always remembering that TikTok Shop's literally only 2-3 years old still. Yeah. It's one of the newest platforms out there, so the growth on it is phenomenal still.
Definitely, I think it's interesting. And I say, you know, going back to all of them, what I liked about every speaker, you know, who came onto this track is, you know, they were talking from real experience, and I think that's, you know, this was something, you know, the Sugar, you know, the girls were very open. It's been a journey, but they've been able to make it really work and stuff. And I think, you know, it's how it, and so just hearing how that they've managed to do that was really interesting.
And then the final session of the day for you was with Douglas from Nextbase, Neil from Furniture Box, and Alex from BigCommerce, talking about customer experience.
Yeah.
So what were the learnings from that session?
Yeah, so again, what was interesting there was you had, so obviously Alex works with Furniture Box and with Douglas over at Nextbase as well. So I think you had a kind of on the one hand, you had the kind of, you know, the supplier, you know, coming at it, can see both angles. But then you had, what was interesting about Douglas and about Neil is that they're both in sort of similar roles talking about customer experience. Yet you had Neil that comes at it with his Furniture Box. He's from a sort of a kind of, hopefully I'll get this right, and if you're watching this, Neil, I apologize if I got it wrong, but the kind of pure play kind of contact center customer experience, so the kind of the human element. And then Douglas is from a real kind of more of a tech base. And I think having the kind of, again, the conversation that we had there was, you know, you had 3 very different opinions about what makes success and what makes a great customer experience. And we did tap into generative AI and stuff on this one, so we couldn't do a whole day without it because it was quite relevant and stuff. And again, it's just, yeah, interesting to get different perspectives. Obviously, you know, I think one of the things we talked about as well is, you know, both of the guys, so Nextbase and Furniture Box, obviously the industries are traditionally very, you know, in-person, touchy-feely in store, but they've moved in onto it's a kind of an all online thing. So I think having that perspective about the successes that they've done, you know, they've achieved with that and why it's important and etc. is interesting, and was a really interesting kind of, you know, few bits of points that we kind of, you know, discuss around, really. So I think, yeah, again, like with all of them, I think it was you know, it was the end of the day, but it was a good one to end on. I think it was, you know, it was you know, really interesting, and having those sort of guys that have sort of done that and having their perspective was fantastic and stuff. And also from a personal point, you know, Furniture Box is based just near where I live, so I get to go around and have a little look at it. So
fantastic. And actually, that's a huge part of the show is the networking opportunities, and finding a business that you can now go visit is just a perfect example.
Exactly.
But I did want to ask what you've taken away from the show, maybe things you never knew before and have surprised you, or maybe things that can help you in your business, intelligence brief. And in fact, tell us a bit more about you and the intelligence brief and what you do as well.
Yeah, no, I can do that, obviously. So the Intelligent Brief, so we're a creative technology platform. We are focused on, as you would imagine with a name like the Intelligent Brief, the creative briefing process. It's around using really sort of how to sharpen the language you use in creative briefing to lead to better and more effective creative work by using kind of technology, so machine learning, AI, to kind of unlock insights and connections between words at this sort of early stage. So I think on the surface you'd probably go, well, how is that related to anything to do with retail? Well, obviously, retail, like any industry, is full of generic language. So it's something that I think is a big problem in the corporate world. But the reason really I do these events and why as much as I like, and I openly will say I love emceeing and I love moderating panel sessions, and the reason why I do that is because I can listen and talk to an interview really super smart, experienced people, and I think that's what for me the biggest takeaway was. You had some really great speakers. And I think it was, being able to listen and understand what is a really interesting kind of industry in marketplaces, and how, where the retail industry is going within that space is just worth knowing more generally. So being able to kind of tap into kind of like, the kind of thought leaders in this space is great. And I think, from the event more broadly, again, there's a lot of the guys that you had exhibiting and stuff. But again, there's some really interesting kind of new companies, or maybe not always new companies, but companies there that are leading the way in this space in stuff. And I think it's, I like events because you get to see, what is the future, and you can start to sort of picture how you can be part of that future. And I think, and then you never know who you're going to meet, where it's going to go. I'm a big fan of serendipity. I think you've got to get to these events, and because you never know who you're going to meet and where it's going to take you and stuff. So I think, that for me is why these things are great. But I think, being part of ChannelX and you guys who are sort of, pushing the boundaries in sort of the retail world and in the conferences within the retail world and marketplaces particularly is it's a great one to be part of. And obviously I appreciate that you let me loose on stage.
No, and I personally, I'd love to have you back next year, and hopefully by then, now you've told me you've downloaded both Snapchat and TikTok, I'll be wanting to know what you've been up to on social and entertainment platforms over the course of next year.
Okay, don't hold me on that one though.
we'll be asking you next year. But James, thanks very much for your time, and really appreciate your insights into the conference.
No problem. I say it's a great conference, and I say thanks for having me, and I look forward to next year in that case.